Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'll give you just a few moments to get all settled, get your chargers, get your snacks, get into the webinar primarily. Uh, and just in the meantime, my name is Sydney. I am one of the event coordinators at Little Shop of Stories, which is an independent bookstore located in Decatur, Georgia. And by the way, we are open for browsing 7 days a week, and our website is also open for those of you who are not local or aren't ready to get out of your houses yet. So we would love to share our books with you, especially the one we're going to be talking about today. So now that shop talk is over, I just have one announcement before we get started with introductions and fun and magic, and that is we are going to be doing a Q&A at the end of this event. So if you have any questions at any point, it can be during the presentation, it can be now, it can be during the Q&A, you can press the little Q&A button at the bottom left of the screen and type out your questions and send them in, and we'll read them out. I think it's really special and fun that we can ask these authors questions and they'll give us their time. So don't be shy, please, please, please send those questions in. Okay, so without further ado, I am so incredibly thrilled to be able to host an award-winning author, the author of the Merlin saga, soon to be a motion picture, which is super exciting. I read his books when I was in middle school. I know he's shared and curated a love of reading in kids all around. He's done it in the past, he's doing it currently. The wonderful T.A. Barron. In addition to writing, Barron serves on a variety of environmental boards and is the founder of a national award for heroic children, the Gloria Barron Prize for Young Heroes. Following a career change to become a writer, Barron has written over 30 books, which is incredible, including international bestsellers, and he is happiest when hiking with his family in the Colorado mountains. So please, please, please help me give a warm and happy welcome to T.A. Barron. Woohoo! Hi, T.A.
Hi, thank you so much, Sydney. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful and happy to be here. This is a really special event for me too, because I have been at this marvelous bookstore where we're all being hosted, but physically, and now to come back and visit with all of you virtually is special. And with Sydney as our host, who's going to bake up a wonderful event for us all. First of all, though, I want to welcome you to my writing room, which is what you see here all around. You can see that it's partly a library. It's actually partly an outdoor recreation gear dumping ground. I've got boots and backpack and even a tent over there. It's basically, as you can tell, it's kind of my version of Merlin's Crystal Cave. And on top of all of that, it's an art gallery where people who are fans and readers from around the world have sent me their wonderful creative art that was inspired by something in the stories. And so I have puppets of characters. I have more than 24 wizard staffs, believe it or not, that people have carved and sent. There are amulets and dragons and all kinds of marvelous little mystery boxes and of course crystals, as well as all sorts of beautiful art. You can see kind of behind me here a painting that was inspired by Tree Girl. There's all sorts of goodies, and I just feel like the luckiest person on the planet to be in a work where we all, and I mean we all, create these stories together. Because as I've walked this path over the years, I've realized that it's really not about a writer just simply telling a story. It's about a co-creation of a story between wonderful, smart, caring, imaginative readers like all of you and a writer. And the shared story that we create is what really then takes life, and then we all end up actually together having this marvelous shared experience, and it keeps on going, and creativity breeds more creativity. So I am feeling very grateful to be here with all of you and welcoming you all virtually anyway into my writing room, what my kids always used to call Dad's workshop, which I especially enjoy because it made me feel like I'm Santa Claus up here, putting some things together that could be shared and enjoyed around the world. Now, I'm going to start, though, by talking about the writing process, which is honestly still, after 32 books, it's still a mystery to me about quite how it happens. There are a few things I do know, though, and I want to start out by saying that there is a wise statement that once was told to me, that there are 3 essential rules for writing the perfect book. And I remember when I was told this by a wonderful and justly beloved author, Madeline L'Engle, I almost dropped the fork I was about to eat my spaghetti with, because I was just like exactly what I wanted to hear. I'd been laboring very hard on my first book. She said, well, 3 essential rules for the perfect book. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they are. So I want you to know that though I do have 3 rules that I'd like to toss out that I hope will encourage all of you aspiring writers and experienced writers, and also just urging you to tell your own stories. One is that honestly, writing is the hardest work I've ever done, and at the same time, the most joyful work I've ever done. So find in your life and in yourself the discipline to keep at it, because the longer you keep at it, the farther you go, and the more you shape what you're doing to a form that you ultimately can share, and that's where the joy comes. Ultimately, the second rule, though, is the one that gives you power, which is write from your passions. Seriously, I've learned that you got to just tap into what it is in this story, this idea that calls to you most deeply, emotionally and spiritually. Tap into that, and it's like this sudden gush of river that you are riding on, and it'll take you where you need to go. I promise, as long as you stay on that. Sometimes you get off into side channels and canyons and tributaries, and you have to find your way back to the main water. All of that is good. And then the third very important rule is never, ever, ever take any advice about storytelling from an author. So that's really what I have to offer. Now, beyond all that, I do think that any successful creative enterprise, whether it's a story or a sculpture or a painting or a symphony, whatever, needs to tap into both sides of the brain. You really need to have both hemispheres of your brain engaged. And what do I really mean by that? The left side of the brain that is connected to the right hand is the side that is about rationality and about logic. And if you're going to tell any kind of a worthwhile story, you have to have a sense of where is it going and what is the logic and what are the growth paths of characters, and really make sure you know that, and you stage it, and you have the appropriate balance of action and moments to take a breath, and the pacing, all of that. Themes, cross-cutting themes, humor, all of those things. You can understand where you're going because of that side of the brain. The other side of the brain, though, the right side, which is connected to the left hand, is the side that houses metaphor and poetry and much of language and storytelling inhabits that side. And I actually am convinced that dreams also well up from that side. The point is that if you're going to tell a good and and thoroughly engaging story that really compels the reader to wake up in their mind and heart, you're gonna need to engage both sides of your brain and find your way of doing that. Now, for me, in doing that, it's quite a process because I've come to realize that I need to start to work on things by hand. So I actually write by hand. This is the early thoughts that I jotted down before I really got going on the book we're going to talk about today, Giant. And it was really helpful. And I think it's also important for me to do it by hand. This is now the expansion of those notes in a kind of early conceptual draft, handwritten, of course. And why handwritten, you'll ask? Because in this age of high tech, why would anybody do that on purpose? Well, I think it's because it awakens both sides of my brain. It is the chemistry of creative work that I'm sure is harkening back to when I was a little kid and leaning back against an apple tree and writing my first poetry. So then I basically, but I'm not saying everybody needs to do that. I'm saying that you need to do what's right for you. And maybe if you're completely comfortable working on a laptop or in some other form, frankly, or in smoke signals, whatever way you want to create your stories, you should do that. Then it expands off of those handwritten notes to things that are typed, but have plenty of room for me to interact with the story as it is emerging. And you can see a lot of that here. This is that initial summary, but then blown up. And then finally, I actually begin to write the story. And at this point, I've got backstories on the main characters, little biographical sketches of them, and the story itself. And I've even started to draw a map, because the map is really important to the story. The place becomes really important. And as we'll talk about more later, the place is not just a background. It's a character in the story. But I write these things and I do it by hand. I know it's crazy, but even the big, long, full meals of a novel that you may have read that I've written, like the books in the Great Tree of Avalon trilogy, all three of those books, that's way more than 1,000 pages together. But that was all written by hand in the first draft and then put onto a computer where I can edit it from there. And then finally, a new story is born. And so that's really a glimpse of my own quirky writing process. And again, I am definitely not suggesting this for anybody else, but I am suggesting that each creative person needs to find that way, find that key that unlocks both sides of the brain. And then you have both the logic and the rationale at the same time as you have metaphor and poetry and ideas that are like dreams that surface. And actually, that is a wonderful way to begin our talk about this book, because really, truly, the beginning of this was 27 years ago when I had a dream about a boy who washed ashore on a magical, dangerous island called Finkyra. And when that boy washes ashore, that begins his journey. Now, those of you who have read the Merlin saga know what I'm describing here is what happens on page 1 of book 1 of the Merlin books, the one that has the subtitle Lost Years. Now, when that lone boy washes ashore, he is half drowned. He's barely alive. he's so weak he can't even sit up. And when he finally comes to and he hears the seagulls screeching over his head, and the surf is crashing and actually tugging at his torn tunic, and almost as if it wants to drag him into the sea and drown him. He crawls a little bit higher. He barfs seawater. It's a terrible moment. But then he realizes something even worse has happened, which is that he has lost all of his memory. So he doesn't have a clue who he is or where he came from. Get this, he doesn't even know his own name. So that he even survives that day is a miracle, right? But truly, that he might someday, if he survives, become the greatest wizard of all times, the fellow we call Merlin, who's been celebrated over 15 centuries. That would be an even bigger miracle if that could happen. So that's how the stories of Merlin really began, was with that dream where I woke up in a cold sweat and I knew that boy is Merlin. And that's really where it all began. So it's also, I must say, where one of the core ideas in the Merlin saga books began, which is that everyone has a hidden potential down inside themselves. I would even say everyone has a magic of their own down inside. The other core idea is an enduring inspiration of nature, because that is the ultimate source of Merlin's magic, and that's his greatest source of power, is that connection with the natural world. So now let's talk about the new book, which is the 13th of the Merlin saga books, but it's actually truly the first one, because it is the prequel. This has arisen because over the years, it's really clear to me that one of the most beloved characters, maybe the most beloved character outside of Merlin in all of the Merlin books, is Shim. He's that little tiny fellow who, against all evidence, insists that he's actually really a giant. And then in that book, as you know, he does discover what it really means to be a giant, and that it has to do with something more than just the size of your bones. But he also leaves a lot of mystery there, including how did he get so small? What happened to him? What were the secret origins of this character? And I've been asked by so many hundreds of people over the years about this, including the people working on the Disney movie. And I decided, it's time to tell that story, and let's make it the prequel. So it could be a standalone story. Somebody doesn't have to have read any of the other books in the Merlin saga to enjoy this one. And then, of course, if they're interested, they can dive into all the other 12 books. But I really step back to tell what really happens to Shim in this. And in this story, I will just say he has to truly discover the meaning of the word giant. He also has to save the person he loves more than anybody in the world. And he also, by the way, has to remember something that's hugely important that he lost. And oh yeah, there's one more thing. He also has to save the world while he's at it. So no biggie. But that's his journey. And as Shim would say, certainly, definitely, absolutely. Now let me make sure it's clear that this is part of a family. This is the first book, the prequel of the 13-book Merlin saga. And if you want to just read about Shim, have a great journey, and you will have a great journey with the book Giant. If you like what you experience there, and if you like the mysteries and adventures and dangers and surprises that are on that magical Isle of Finkyra, then please be my guest. Dive in, and all the Merlin saga awaits you, and all of Merlin's worlds awaits you. So now I'm gonna shift gears here, and it would really be fun to give you a reading from Giant. That's a little passage that I think will give you a sense of Shim and what lies ahead for him, but also not reveal any big surprises, because that's going to await for you when you actually read the book. So let me just read to you a passage that's toward the beginning of the book. It's when Shim is walking through a very deep and mysterious forest, and he suddenly meets one of the fiercest and most dangerous creatures in all of Finkyra, a wyvern, which, as many of you already know, is a small and ferocious kind of dragon. And by the way, Shim in this encounter also meets someone else, someone who just might change his life. So settle back and enjoy a little story time here. An immense owl took flight and glided silently over to her nest in the hollow of a cypress tree. Suddenly, a piercing shriek cut through the forest. Shim halted in his tracks, instantly recognizing the shrill, angry cry made by only one kind of beast, a wyvern. He ran toward the sound, scaling the ravine and topping the next rise in just a few giant-sized bounds. As the shrieking grew louder, he started to hear other very different sounds as well. Thunderous booms and crashes, along with a chorus of tiny voices that cried out in agony. Bursting out of the trees and into a clearing, he saw the wyvern, a powerful one with gleaming purple scales that covered his entire body from the tips of his jagged wings to the heavy ball of bone at the end of his tail. Shrieking wildly, the purple wyvern lunged repeatedly at a deep cavern in an immense outcropping of stone. As his wings slapped the air, his deadly claws slashed at the cavern entrance, breaking off chunks of stone. Small winged creatures, glowing bright blue but moving too fast for Shim to see clearly, buzzed around the wyvern's head. All the while, the little beings wailed piteously. Sometimes the wyvern's jaws snapped closed on them, abruptly ending their lives. More of them fell from his slapping wings. With every passing second, their numbers lessened, their glow forever extinguished. The wyvern kept slashing at the cavern, clearly searching for something. Suddenly, he reared back and slammed the ball of his tail against the entrance, smashing the outcropping so hard that several boulders broke off, crushing more of the glowing blue creatures. All the while, the dragon-like beast screeched furiously, a cry meant to freeze anyone nearby in terror. But not Shim. Enraged by this brutality, he roared and ran headlong into battle. He threw all his weight into the charge, slamming full force into the wyvern's shoulder. Shrieking louder than ever, the surprised beast rolled backward, slicing his jaw on a sharp edge of stone. Purple blood oozed from the wound. The wyvern whirled around to face his attacker, blood dripping from his lower lip, fires of revenge burning in his eyes. Shim, who had been thrown backward by the impact, rolled aside, just in time to avoid the wyvern's tail, which smashed down on that very spot. Leaping up, he grabbed a huge boulder and hurled it at the wyvern. The beast jumped, but the boulder clipped one wing, ripping off a whole row of scales that sprinkled the ground amidst bits of stone and the bodies of lifeless little things. Raging, the wyvern whipped his jagged wings and brandished his claws, preparing to attack. All his thoughts now were bent on just one goal: revenge. Shim knew that a single slice from those claws could sever his arm, or worse. He lunged for another boulder, even bigger than the first. With all his strength, he lifted it to throw, but this rock was so heavy that he wobbled unsteadily. Then he lost his balance, tumbling over on the ground. The wyvern snarled, sensing victory. Knowing that his enemy would soon perish, the beast's eyes flamed brighter. Slowly he raised his claws, poised to vanquish this bold young giant who had dared to intrude. Just as the wyvern was about to leap, he noticed a small, shiny object at the edge of the cavern. Shimmering with a strange orange glow, this object caught his full attention. A greedy rumble reverberated in the wyvern's throat as he stared, spellbound. Taking advantage of the delay, Shim stood up. He braced himself and grasped the boulder again, lifting it high enough to throw. With every fiber of his muscles, he hurled it at the wyvern. In a flash, the wyvern dodged the boulder and leaped, not at Shim, but at the orange prize that had caught his attention. Grasping the object in his claws, he took off with a last triumphant shriek that shook the nearby trees. As he flew away, blood still dripping from his jaw, he cast a vengeful glance back at the unexpected foe who had caused so much trouble. Shim stared back at the departing wyvern. Though shaky from all the stress of battle, he stood as tall as possible. And tall was what he felt again, no longer the hauntingly small likeness that he had seen earlier that day in the mist, but a giant in every way, big enough and brave enough to scare off a wyvern. Then, looking down, he caught his breath. That terrible bully had destroyed dozens of innocent lives. Tiny, broken bodies lay scattered everywhere. Some still had their delicate blue wings attached, while others were torn to shreds. None of them showed any signs of life. Fairies! Recognizing them from the stories his mother had told him, he bent down to look closer. Though their only movement now came from the gentle breeze that stirred their broken and tattered wings, he knew that these tiny blue beings had once been among the most beautiful and graceful creatures in all of Finkyra. Luminous fairies, he said to himself, recalling their species name. Like all the other kinds of fairies, wondrous beings who lived in watery places or moss carpets or starflower meadows across the island, these fairies had translucent wings and elegant antennae, and their own special magic. But no other kind had magic to equal that of the luminous fairies, for these fairies could actually produce their own light, glowing as they flew like small winged stars. A tiny flicker of blue light over by the cavern caught his eye. Barely perceptible, it seemed no more than a single spark, probably just the light glinting on a shard of stone. Nevertheless, he moved closer to investigate. He gasped. It came from a fairy. Though bedraggled and smudged with dirt, the tiny creature flickered ever so slightly. Pale blue light glowed on her whole body, from the tip of her nose to the edges of her wings, which seemed as evanescent as rainbows. With great care, Shim picked up the fairy and held her in the palm of his hand. Smaller than his fingernail, she quivered, glowing weakly. Slowly, slowly, she seemed to revive. Straightening her two antennae, which each ended with a rounded knob that resembled a bell. Gold in color, those bell-shaped knobs were the only parts of her that weren't radiant blue. The fairy's light grew stronger bit by bit. Finally, she opened her eyes, which shone as bright blue as the sunlit sky. For several heartbeats, the fairy looked up at Shim. Then she shook her antenna, and a slow, somber ringing filled the air. For those golden knobs were indeed bells, and now they rang in sorrow. My family, moaned the little fairy in a voice so quiet it was barely a whisper. My family, my whole colony, attacked without any warning by that wyvern, finished the giant. They is truly bad, horribobulous things. Leaning his face closer so that his bulbous nose almost touched the delicate creature in his hand, he said softly, I'm so verily sorry for you. The fairy ceased her ringing of the antenna bells. Peering up at the giant, she said sadly, today I lost everything, my family, my home, everything. She paused, quivering. But I also found something. What? Someone very brave. Well, I hope you all enjoyed hearing that as much as I enjoyed writing it. I am so thrilled again to welcome you all here into my writing room, my crystal cave. And now comes my favorite part of this event, which is the Q&A. And I'm really eager to hear what questions are on your mind, and promise to do my best to answer them. As Shim would say, certainly, definitely, absolutely. So, Sydney, I turn it back over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to get the ball rolling and to remind people to ask your questions, I know we have a couple. I would just like to know, what do you think makes Shim a protagonist? What makes him a hero?
What a wonderful question. The definition of a hero, I think, is often done in a way that's too shallow. I think true heroes never think of themselves as heroes. And in fact, they don't in any way resemble what we often think of as a hero. A true hero is a very unlikely person to save the day. They are a normal, regular person in whatever form, but they are put in a situation where they are extremely vulnerable and really under great stress. And that is the moment where a hero digs deep inside of herself or himself and finds the qualities that actually truly make a hero. Qualities like courage or compassion, or the grace to do that next right thing. Qualities like hope and loyalty and love, and where it's very, very difficult to be brave. Those are the qualities that really make a hero. I will also add that in our culture, one of the problems we have is that people confuse a celebrity with a hero, and they're not the same thing. A celebrity is someone who's widely known for whatever reason. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but even if it's good, it's not about the qualities of character that I was just talking about. Those are the qualities that really last. Those are the qualities that really can change a person's life and also the lives of those around them, possibly even change the world. And so that's why I love writing about unlikely heroes. They may be a little tiny fellow who truly believes that there's a giant inside him. It might be a girl who has lost all of her family and has a strong desire, as Anna in Tree Girl has, to do the most frightening thing of all, which is to cross the danger zone and discover who her family really is. Or it could be the two lead characters, a boy named Promi and a girl named Atlanta in the Atlantis trilogy, who actually do create the most magical island on earth, the one we call Atlantis. So you get to find out not just how Atlantis is destroyed, which we've all heard that wonderful tragic story many, many times, but how it was created. Or Kate, who's a regular teenage girl who suddenly realizes that a great tree that's in danger of being cut down is actually also a time tunnel. And she goes back in time to find the lost secret of what happened to a mysterious tribe of Native Americans who were there in that same place that we now call Oregon centuries before. All of this is just, these are just some random examples, and anybody who's read my books knows that there are literally hundreds more. It's really important to think of heroes, I think, as not people who are made into statues, but in fact, all of us who have the capacity to dig deep and find those heroic qualities that can really change the world. And that's why, I'll add one more thing, I wrote another book that's nonfiction called The Hero's Trail, that's just filled with stories of real people, real kids in the Hero's Trail from all around the world. And that prize that Sydney mentioned honors another 25 kids a year who really have just never gotten a memo that children don't have any power to make a difference. And they do. And it's heroic.
They absolutely do. That was such a wonderful, insightful answer. Thank you so much. We do have some questions in our Q&A. So someone wants to know, do you expect Giant to be the last addition to the Merlin saga?
Oh my heavens. I have learned to never say never about anything when it comes to how stories expand and change. I was actually sharing with Sydney before we got on that the origins of what is now this 13-book Merlin saga was that dream that I told you about, but I really thought it was one book. It was how that boy who washes ashore, half drowned and barely alive, how he becomes ultimately the greatest wizard of all times and saves this magical island that's partly mortal and partly immortal, poised between earth and heaven, called Finkyra. And oh, by the way, falls in love, and oh, by the way, learns that he has great magic and how to wield it and not abuse it, and makes plenty of mistakes and grows along the way and discovers all these great treasures and enormous power along the way. Well, no way that could happen in one book. And I was struggling with it and realized, you know what, this is really a trilogy. My editor was fine with that. And then I got into the second book of the trilogy and I realized he has so much more adventures ahead and so much more growing to do. There's no way I could do this in 3 books. So I called my editor and I said, you know what, this is actually going to be a 3 books that grows into 5 books. So she said, so you're writing a 5-book trilogy, right? And I said, yeah, that's right. Anyway, neither of us knew that would grow to 12 books, including that glossary volume at the very end that has all kinds of secret backstories of all of the characters. All of my original notes, it's wonderful. Sydney has her copy there.
I do.
This is great because that book really actually contains my notes on all of the more than 150 main characters and magical objects and enchanted places and secret backstories and histories of the landscape and the peoples of Finkyra that I used to actually make sure I was keeping it all straight in telling the later tales. Anyway, I'm so glad to share it all with you. And now, boom, here's a 13th book that has just been born. And so the family keeps expanding. So I never will say never. You never know.
Great answer. I love the never say never. I'm sure everyone else loves the never say never because we can never have enough. This one actually veers off a little bit. I actually really like this question. Are there any environmental jobs or careers that you recommend? I'm looking to get an environmental science degree in college, but I'm not so sure what to do with it.
Oh, marvelous. Yes, I have some thoughts for you. And first of all, bless you. because the earth needs you. And there's going to be only increasing importance to that work of environmental science in the decades and time to come. And so your life is going to be devoted to some very big and important challenges that really truly matter. Look, when you step back and you look at this wondrous planet of ours, really do think of it from an outer space view. And when you've seen pictures of the Earth from the moon or from outer space, and you know that little blue dot is surrounded by blackness, open space, emptiness in many, many directions. And we're the only place we know of where there is life that has evolved and has taken shape and form. And we are the conscious life on this planet that has a chance to be good stewards. That's a very high calling. Whether humanity will rise to that or not is going to, I think, be determined in your lifetimes. The stewardship of this planet really requires understanding all of its deep and rich complexities, and have a healthy sense of humility about how little we know, and therefore how respectful we have to be for nature's complex processes. So back to your question about where do you go to work? I would highly recommend that you think about working for one of the, well, there's several avenues. One of the nonprofit organizations, the NGOs that are doing just fantastic work out there in the world, helping to try and save our fellow species or save endangered places like Borneo and the wild forests of Indonesia, Southern Africa, the Amazon, the Arctic, all kinds of places, the ocean. I would just name a few of those. The Wilderness Society, World Wildlife Fund, Oceana, if ocean life interests you especially. Wildlife Conservation Society is another terrific one. And if you're interested in the laws that really help protect our system, that are laws created by that goal of stewardship, I would think about an organization called Earth Justice. There's a wonderful organization based in San Francisco. Now, and that's a very good path to go, but you also may want to go in a more academic and research-driven direction, which is also a wonderful place to be, because you can make a great difference through your teaching and writing and speaking in that realm. So you could become a professor or a researcher or a teacher in middle school of nature and science. One of my wonderful children, my oldest daughter, is an educator in elementary schools where she teaches environmental science. And so there are a lot of ways to do this, but stay true to your goal. I really am proud of you already for thinking of it that way, and don't let anybody ever dissuade you from going down that path.
It's really wonderful. Going off of that, how does your love of nature play into your writing, and where can we see that?
Well, I have to say that for me, nature is my greatest form of inspiration, outside of my kids, who really are the greatest inspiration possible. But they're also the only reason that my books ever really work is because I got to try them out on a group of wonderfully humorous and irreverent, fresh and honest, brilliant kids, and see if I could hold their attention for a little while. But nature here, let's get serious about this, because nature really gives us not just sustenance, not just the food and the clean air and the clean water that we require, which is plenty, as well as all of our fellow creatures that share this wonderful planet with us. But it also gives us something deeper, I feel, It gives us a sense of enlargement in the greater, wider universe all around. In fact, I would go this far. I'd say that nature is the place where, for me, I feel both very, very small, humbled by all that largeness, and also very, very big, because I too am part of that wonderful expanse of creation. I think that both at once are very possible, but you have to, if you have to be out in nature to experience it. You go to one of my Colorado mountains here on a starry night in summer, and you see stars so bright you almost have to squint your eyes because they're so bright. Then you feel small and large at once. Or if you go to the ancient redwood forests of Northern California, and you get a sense of the immensity of those trees and the just the sheer wonderment of them, you're really among giants there. You're both very small and very large, because we too share this great planet, and we're a form of life as they are. Or if you stand by the ocean's edge and look out along that tremendous expanse, you're small and you're large at once. So I find then, how does that turn into story? For me, it becomes a way of making sure that every place I write about, especially imaginary places, has to feel true for bright readers like you. And by that, I'm really making a bigger point than just describing in detail the place, although that's important. I think you have to bring all the senses to life in any description of place. And you'll notice when Kate is starting to walk in the ancient forests of the Ancient One on page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, she's in a rainstorm. There are the smells of the resins of the forest all around her. She's crunching on fallen needles and leaves and bark. There are sounds of a mysterious owl in the distance hooting, or who knows, perhaps it's someone playing the flute. All of this at once gives you a sense of the place, but there's more to it than that. The place really has to be well known to me as a writer enough that it comes across to you as not just a setting for the story, a background, but a character itself. So Finkyra has mood swings. It has a set of it has dark and mysterious and dangerous places. It has bright and sunny and very alive places. It has surprises beyond count. It has histories of peoples. It has secret underground civilizations. It has wonderful ancient monuments that are so old people have forgotten what they were built for. It has all kinds of mysterious, wondrous creatures. It also has a crystal cave. It has all of that and hidden treasures all around, and I will add some dangerous and unusual people who are unlike anybody young Merlin, and I would venture to say any reader, has ever met before. All of these are part of the character of that place. So if Finkyra feels real, if Atlantis feels real, if the great tree of Avalon feels real, if Tree Girl's Forest feels real, if any of the places in my children's picture books like High as a Hawk feel real, it's because they really are characters in the story.
I love that. And you can just feel your love for it in every sentence that you say, every sentence that you write. It's just great. Our next question is, how did you come up with your names that you use in your books, and what characters have the hardest names to pronounce?
Oh, I love that question. You know, the fact is that when you weave a tapestry of a story, and that's how I think of it actually, is thread by thread. The threads that are names are exceedingly important. Every thread is important, but the names really have to be really thoughtfully chosen. And with the one exception of the character whose name would ultimately become Merlin, I didn't know the names when I started out. And I actually needed to get to know these characters well enough to feel that I could say, okay, so what is your real name? Okay, you know, I've been calling you Sydney, but actually, what is your real name? And then the character says, well, my name is Candle Dandle. And then suddenly I know. And that's in fact part of my process. And I feel like the naming of characters, really, the point is, the naming of characters has to feel authentic, has to feel really true to the smart and caring reader like you all. And because you will know if a name just doesn't feel like, no, that's not from the same mythic dimension or the same kind of time or the same zone as this character. So that's why it's actually quite important. So for example, in all the books of the Merlin saga, all of them, I lean heavily on names that are Celtic in origin, because that's part of the world where the lore of Merlin began. And so there are exceptions to that, like Merlin's wonderful friend Trouble, who is a very brave hawk, is named Trouble because that's really what the right name is. And I didn't need to know Trouble very long as a character to realize you are Trouble. And that's really what he is. So he's also intensely loyal and devoted to Merlin, and that's his great redemption there. But I also found that other names like Rhea, that brave, wonderful, way wise beyond her years girl who lives in the forest, the enchanted forest called Druma Wood. Rhea was the right name for her, was actually a name I got from Celtic myth, which is Rhiannon or Rhiannon, and it is shortened to Rhea in the books, but that's where her name comes from. Even the Druma Wood, Druma is the ancient Celtic word for oak tree. Even the island of Finkyra, right, that we've been talking about here, is named because I knew it was a magical place. I knew it had a special position between the mortal and immortal realms. That was going to be Merlin's destination for what I thought: 1 book, 3 books, 5 books, 12 books, 13 books, all of those books. But I needed to choose that name wisely. So that map of the place was unlabeled for a long time before it finally became the name that's in the book and in all the books. But where I got that was from an ancient Celtic ballad that was one that I discovered that after about a year of research. Before I even started the Merlin books, I read everything about Celtic lore and about Merlin that I could find. And that's where I really honed in on the gap about his youth and so little being ever told there. It made me realize that's the best part of his story. That's a big hole in his tapestry of story, his youth. It's where he would discover all the most important things of his life, and I would get to weave in those threads. But the name for Finkyra was in a poem that was an old Celtic ballad that actually was translated into the French, and it was very, very succinct. It only had two lines about it. It said, Finkyra, that island beneath the waves, not mortal, not immortal. And I was stunned, because that's exactly what it is. It's an island, but beneath the waves. Think Carl Jung and the subconscious, okay? And it's not mortal or immortal, it's both. So it has that special place. Now, I'll tell you one more story about names before we end on this question, because it's really fun. I'm here in my writing room, Dad's workshop, right? And I never closed the door here when I was working, when we had small children, and they were really welcome to always come in and join me up here. The only rule was that they needed to do something creative. If I was working away on something creative, so I had a little table here, a little foot table that was covered with papers and felt tip pens and crayons and scissors and all kinds of stuff. So a lot of times the kids would come in and draw pictures or write a poem when they got older, or work on a story of their own. And it was great. Now, when the kids were really little, though, that rule bought me half a second, I mean, no time at all. And so, but it was all right. I didn't mind getting interrupted because kids aren't 2.5 years old very long, and it's a really wonderful experience to be with them. So I felt very lucky and grateful, frankly, to put down my pen and be with them and read them a story or tell them a story. But there was one time when my daughter, the one who's now the environmental educator, came up these stairs, and I think she was about 4, and she saw I had a row of candles on my windowsill, and she pointed to them, and she was into making rhymes at that point, learning the fun of language and rhymes. She pointed to the windowsill, and and by the way, at this very moment, I was really struggling to name one of the characters who just didn't come together. That name really was eluding me, and it was in the book, The Ancient One. And I knew that the name had to rhyme, and I knew it had to have a kind of special, kind of humorous ring to it, but it had to be deeper than that too. So anyway, I was working on that, and that was just one of those 100 problems out there that I hadn't solved, but it was increasingly bothersome to me. I didn't have the name for this really important character. Anyway, little Denali walked over to the candles on the windowsill, and she started to say, "Candle, candle, candle, dandle." And I was on my chair, this very chair, and I had my notepad right on my lap, and I heard that name, Candle Dandle, and I exclaimed, "That's it!" And I threw my notepad up in the air as well as my pen, and scared the living daylights out of my daughter by doing that. And so, but I had the name. I was happy with the name Candle Dandle, but my wonderful little daughter went running down the stairs, yelling, "Mommy, mommy, Daddy's yelling at me," so I went down and I apologized and told her those. She'd given me a really important name. But that's why if you open a copy of The Ancient One to the dedication page, it is dedicated to my 4-year-old daughter, Denali, for giving me the name Candle Dandle. True story.
Sweet story. I love that. Speed round, just real fast. What realm of Avalon would you like to live in?
What realm of Avalon? I would live in the root realms, and I would live in Woodroot, I think, where the magical enchanted forest is. Although it's very tempting to live in the water realm as well, or any of the others where all kinds of mysterious creatures live. But I would have to choose one. I would go with Woodroot.
Gotcha. Great answer. How does Merlin from the Merlin effect fit into the Merlin saga continuity? Like, when does it take place, in parentheses?
That's a great question. It takes place 1,000 years later. It's because that's when Merlin is the elder wizard, and he's discovered by Kate, my teenage hero in that story, who has to go down to the dangerous place at the bottom of the sea to rescue a treasure that is actually an object of huge power before other forces get there. And she encounters, let us say, someone who just might be more than they seem. And I'll leave it to you to discover who that is. But that's That's all wrapped up in an ancient myth about the power of this object being something that Merlin had placed inside of it.
Great. You're so secretive with your answers. You're making sure we read.
Well, I don't want to give any spoilers.
Right. No spoilers here.
I mean, I didn't even say that the real name of a woodroot is El Urien, but you have to discover that yourself and why.
Right.
It's fun.
Final speed round question. This is one that I ask in every single author event because I think it's such a great question. I'm stealing it from Jeff Sentner, the YA author, because he asked it and I can't get over how great it was. What about Giant are you proud of? No cop-out answers. What are you proud of?
Absolutely no cop-out answers ever, whether in a book reading or with answering children's questions ever. But let me just say, I think of stories as a kind of a boat that I get to assemble plank by plank, bit by bit. Sometimes it's driftwood that floats to me off of the ocean of imagination that we all share. Sometimes it's a surprise that appears from who knows what source. But that boat ultimately is big enough to carry me and you and any number of other folks on a journey to faraway, magical, mysterious places. And then we go off on an adventure together. And inside that boat, down in the hull, hidden away, always has to be a big idea. An idea about like, can even a small young person make a difference? Or how are we all connected to each other? Or what is the magic in nature? Or is there potential in every person to really make the world a better place? And in this case, I really felt that idea needed to take life in Giant. It needed to be shown and fully alive so that every reader could feel not just in Shim, but also in themselves, that it doesn't matter how small you are. It matters how brave you are, how loving you are. And so I feel like, yes, that boat floats and it carries a big idea, an idea big enough that you could even say it's giant.
I had to hold off on my giant puns. I'm so glad you threw that in. What a great answer. I say this with every author event, and I mean it with every single one. Hearing authors speak about their work is so inspiring. It's heartwarming, and you can just feel how much you guys love what you do. And it's been so wonderful talking to you. In fact, we had someone put a thank you in the Q&A, and they said, thank you both so much. This was wonderful. Thank you for answering all of my questions, and it feels like we had a great conversation. So thank you to you in the Q&A. You are anonymous, so I can't thank you by name, but no, we saw it. TA, would you like to say anything before we log off? Say your warm goodbyes.
Yes, just simply, I am so grateful. I'm filled with gratitude right now for you, Sydney, for your wonderful bookstore here. The Little Shop of Stories is a grand and fabulous, mysterious island of its own. And I'm also for bringing us all together here and for giving me a chance to share a few of my own stories and inspirations. I'm very grateful. And to everybody out there, everybody who sees this video, I really want to wish you a magical journey of your own, whether it's in my books or any other stories. I hope that your boats will take you to far away, wondrous places.
Thank you so much. You have been so wonderful to talk to, so inspiring, as I said. Thank you for welcoming us into your crystal cave. I love it. It's so fun.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you to everyone who's joined and listened in on this conversation and contributed. It's been such a lovely and insightful conversation. You asked great questions. And you can get a copy of Giant from Little Shop of Stories, we would be so happy to give that to you. Like I said, we're open 7 days a week and our website is up and running. So you can find that on our website. We have it on the events tab, and we would love, love, love to give you a copy of Giant. Right, everyone? I hope you have a wonderful night, and I hope you stay safe and warm in this cold fall weather. And thank you again. It's been lovely. Bye, everyone. Goodbye, TA.